We shall overcome is the promise of the civil rights movement. Yet America has not overcome the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Yes, there is a man serving 99 years in prison for the crime, James Earl Ray. And yes, he confessed. But we have uncovered new evidence suggesting James Earl Ray did not act alone, if he acted at all. Tonight, as you watch James Earl Ray go further than he ever has before, as you hear Dr. King's son comment for the first time, as you hear powerful testimony and evidence, remember the promise we made more than 20 years ago.
But I've always felt that it was a conspiracy.
And I'm telling you now, as I recall this man just very clearly rise out of these bushes. He was in sort of a crouched, stooping position.
And they were providing the logistics to the person who did the actual murder, the foreign mercenary.
Might bring the nation down. It's that big.
The unanswered questions about the accomplices of James Earl Ray must one day be answered and be made known.
For some 20 years, James Earl Ray has called this place home, Brushy Mountain State Prison in Tennessee. And for just as long, James Earl Ray has maintained his innocence. He claims he was the unwitting victim in a conspiracy to assassinate Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Today, for the first time on camera ever, he tells us just who he thinks those conspirators are.
We're almost 99% convinced that there was some renegade faction in the FBI that pulled it off. And I think they probably used an individual from a foreign intelligence agency to actually commit the murder.
So now, after not being sure for so many years, for the first time you're saying you think this radical faction of the FBI was responsible for killing Dr. King?
I'm certain, I'm almost certain that based on 20 years of investigation and reading documents.
But this is the first time you're saying this on national television. James Earl Ray claims that he was framed, that he's the fall guy in a conspiracy to assassinate Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., and that the FBI is responsible. But we're getting ahead of the story, a story which begins when James Earl Ray broke out of prison in Missouri 1 year before Dr. King's murder. Some suggest conspirators helped Ray escape because a fugitive makes an easy patsy. Can you name your aliases for me?
The first one was John L. Raines. The next one was Eric Starville Galt. I believe the next one was, I used the name Willard one time.
There's so many of them you can't remember them
I can't
all.
recall them, yes.
Why did you have so many aliases?
Well, it was really necessary. I couldn't use my own name, obviously, because I was a fugitive from Missouri prison, yes.
James Earl Ray escaped to Montreal. He planned to stay long enough to get a forged passport to flee North America. In Montreal, Ray claims he met a mysterious man named Raoul. To this day, there's absolutely no proof that Raoul even exists. But Ray maintains he cut a deal with Raoul.
I was trying to get a passport to get out of the country. And this individual I met in this bar up there in Montreal, this Raoul, he promised me a passport.
In exchange for what?
Helping me take some packages across the border in Detroit from Canada in the United States.
Drugs?
I'm certain it was. They were plastic packages.
Ray says Raoul soon switched to smuggling guns, that it was Raoul who had Ray buy a 30-06, that it was Raoul who ordered his movements from city to city. Ray claims he had no idea that his travels eerily mirrored Dr. King's. Finally, Ray claims it was Raoul who had him check into a Memphis boarding house across from the Lorraine Motel. Ray says he left Raoul alone in his room. He returned to find King shot. Do you think Raoul did it?
Well, I think he probably did it because he's in the room, so,
Doesn't that upset you that this man who you were working for 7 months set you up and so here you sit?
I'm not really happy about it. I
So
don't
you have no hard feelings about Raul?
Yes, naturally. Well, naturally, you're made a fool of, supposed to be.
Some people might say, James, that
Yeah.
that's awfully convenient.
Yeah.
You traveled with Raul for 7 months.
Yeah.
If people want to
Yeah.
believe you, you're not giving these people very much.
Well, the only thing I can do is give the description. I mean, I could draw, have some artists draw a composite of it.
Now, James Earl Ray has never been that bright a person. He was probably one of the dumbest people on the planet. And I don't say that facetiously. If you check his record of crime, it was awesome. He never literally committed a crime in his life that 30 minutes after he committed it, he was not apprehended. So all at once, here's this dumb, uneducated thug pulls off almost the crime of the century and can get by.
The House Select Committee on Assassinations investigated the King murder nearly a decade after he was killed. The committee found that James Earl Ray fired the one shot that killed Dr. King and that Dr. King was probably the victim of a conspiracy. Then it condemned the FBI, saying the conduct of some members contributed to the hostile climate that led to the assassination, that their conduct was morally reprehensible, illegal, felonious, and unconstitutional. Yet there was no evidence linking the FBI to the assassination. Historically, the man who headed up the FBI was a recognized racist. J. Edgar Hoover formed a program which discredited civil rights organizations and ultimately Dr. King. The program was called COINTELPRO. Its official function was to investigate communism. After the connection between Dr. King and the Communist Party clearly had been disproven, the FBI still tapped his phones and even sent a letter to King which threatened to expose derogatory personal information and implied he should commit suicide. The letter read, "King, there is only one thing left for you to do."
Dr. King was seen as a national security threat. Their role was to disrupt, discredit, or destroy the black movement. And so some of us have never been at all relieved of any theory that distanced the FBI and the government from involvement at some level in Dr. King's assassination.
What's more, another G-Man's movement seemed related to Dr. King's. Frank Holloman was inspector in charge of Hoover's office. He had been in charge of the FBI in Atlanta, King's hometown, and in Memphis, where King was killed. But at that time, Holloman was director of the Memphis Police and Fire Departments. Just hours before King was shot, the blacks at a fire station across from the Lorraine Motel were transferred, a policeman and 2 firemen, one of them, Lloyd Newsom. In all of your 31 years on the fire department, had you ever been detailed to another fire department before in the middle of the night?
No. They wouldn't call you at home and say you were detailed somewhere else the next day. No.
Does it still hurt somewhere inside that you weren't somehow there to see something or to keep it from happening?
I thought the world of Dr. King, and to think that, you know, if I was moved to prevent me from seeing or hearing, it's hurting, yes.
Former Assistant FBI Director Cartha Deloche headed the investigation into the assassination. Little did we know that Cartha Deloche was a major architect of COINTELPRO, which, remember, tried to destroy Dr. King. So the massive attempt to solve King's murder may not have been entirely objective. It may have been flawed. That's what former New York Times reporter, columnist Earl Caldwell believes.
From the day of the assassination until this day, no police, no local Memphis cop, no FBI agent, nobody, absolutely no one has ever come to me and said, your room faced these flop houses where the shot supposedly was fired from. What did you see?
Caldwell was staying at the Lorraine Motel and is the most credible of several witnesses who saw a man in the bushes right after the single shot rang out. A man some suspect was the assassin, yet Caldwell has never been called to testify until now. For the first time, he describes what he saw.
And I'm telling you now, as I recall this man just very clearly rise out of these bushes. He was in sort of a crouched, stooping position. I did not see a weapon in this man's hands. The weeds were brown, and they were high weeds in the back of that. It was like thicket. And this guy came up out of that. And also, of course, the man in the bushes was a white man.
The King family survived violent conspiracy from the very beginning. Their home was bombed in '56. They overcame. Dr. King stabbed in the chest in '58. He overcame. More violence, 2 more King bombings, then the speech. And for a fleeting moment, we overcame.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
The day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated, he said, as we were watching the television in silence and obviously very pained, as most people were, he said, that's exactly what's going to happen to me. I don't expect to survive this revolution. Our society is too sick. This was 1963. 5 years later, he paid that same price.
Dr. King was laid to rest in the spirit which filled his days, a poor folk's funeral. His last speech, his last words, rang in his followers' ears. The night before he was killed, he spoke for the first time publicly about how he might be martyred.
And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
It was as if everyone in the movement had read the book and now were seeing the movie. The ultimate sacrifice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was expected. Yet when it arrived, many African Americans felt ill-prepared emotionally. They did not push for a trial or a full accounting. It hurt too much.
We immediately said, the leader has been slain, the work must go on. It's not who killed him, it's what killed him, a sick society. It really was our way of avoidance, a kind of avoidance behavior, I suppose, in retrospect.
How do you feel about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?
Well, I don't like to take positions on controversial individuals. That's like, there's a lot
You think he's a controversial individual?
Well, I guess some of his policies were. When they're killed, I think that's tragic, and for their families and everything else. But other than that, I don't have any particular feelings for individuals.
You don't have any feeling whatsoever for all the great strides he made for the black people in this country?
Well, I don't really think that pertains to me too much. I don't have any position, opinions on that one way or the other.
I got to call you on this.
Mm-hmm.
Your lack of enthusiasm about Dr. King strikes me as being a bit racist. It really does.
Well, I'm not enthusiastic about a lot of issues. I'm not enthusiastic about Richard Nixon, his policies, or President Kennedy. I'm just not interested in it because I've got enough problems of my own. I'm in railroad in the penitentiary for 20 years.
It is a bit odd that even though James Earl Ray claims he's innocent, he doesn't seem to be in too much of a hurry to get out of prison. Maybe it's because he spent most of his adult life behind bars. But the only way he thinks he will get out is if he gets a trial. And the only way to get a trial, he says, is to declassify some of the classified documents. But he doesn't ever expect to be paroled. Nope, that's not too popular an idea around these parts. Coretta and Dexter Scott King steadfastly refused to comment publicly on who killed Dr. King. Instead, they talk around the edges of assassination.
I honestly feel that if someone really wants to do you harm, there's no amount of security that you can have.
Are those days of violence over now? Not necessarily.
Fulton County Commissioner Martin Luther King III has talked privately about the assassination with his brother Dexter, but never with his mother and never with a reporter until now.
But I've always felt that it was a conspiracy. I don't see how any one individual could have done what was done and gotten as far as Mr. Ray supposedly got. I don't know that he was a scapegoat. I'm not convinced. I believe he was involved in some way, form, or fashion. Don't know which way, don't know if he was the trigger man.
True or false? You, James Earl Ray, stalked Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. just before he was assassinated.
No, not intentionally.
False.
Yes.
That you were in the boarding house?
Yes.
That you were in the bathroom of the boarding house?
I may have been once. I'm not certain.
That you fired a shot from the bathroom of the boarding house?
No, I'm not certain about it. Even there was a shot fired from the bathroom, but there could have been.
That it was you that fired the shot?
No, that's the state's contention. I can't prove I didn't, and they can't prove I did, so that's...
Did you
No.
fire the shot
No.
from the bathroom?
No, I didn't fire a shot.
True or false? That you fired the one shot that killed Dr. King?
No, I don't really believe I'm that good a shot to shoot someone like that, the one shot.
We shall overcome.
Obviously, it's very, very serious and is much bigger than any of us as individuals.
We shall overcome.
It reaches all the way up into the highest level of a conspiracy.
We shall overcome someday.
The conclusion is that Ray did not act alone. So are the other people who were involved, are they alive? And if so, where?
I believe that we have to respond to things that are unjust and wrong.
So how far have we come in the more than 20 years since? A growing body of evidence strongly suggests that conspirators killed Dr. King. A growing body of evidence suggests justice has not been done. A growing body of evidence suggests we have not overcome. Maybe it's time we should.